Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the Beavercreek Board of Zoning Appeals for 2023. Happy New Year, everybody. Ms. Gillow, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Botla.
Present.
Mr. Clunin.
Present.
Mr. Essman.
Present.
Mr. Rust.
Present.
Mr. Archibald.
Here. All right, thank you very much. Everybody's here and accounted for. An unusual happening these days. And we have an agenda in front of us. Do we have any additions or subtractions to the agenda? If none, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. And a second. By voice vote, all in favor of approving the agenda as written, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. The minutes. We had a meeting in December, and the minutes have been distributed to us. Anybody have any additions, subtractions, adjustments, modifications to the minutes as written?
I move we accept the minutes as written.
Okay, I guess we don't have any corrections or anything, so we have a motion on the floor to accept the minutes as written. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes of the December 14th meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals is hereby approved. Next, the only thing we have on the agenda for tonight, besides adjournment, is a public hearing, V23-1, David Hanson, 3091 Springhill Road. Yes.
This is case number V23-1 on an application filed by David Hanson, 3091 Spring Hill Road, Beavercreek, Ohio, 45434, requesting a variance from Chapter 158-104E of the City of Beavercreek Zoning Code, requesting permission for the 102 square foot accessory structure shed that was constructed without a permit and exceeds the maximum square footage for accessory structures to remain in the rear yard. The property is located on the south side of Spring Hill Road, 2 lots west of the intersection of Catherine Drive and Spring Hill Drive, further described as Book 5, Page 8, Parcel 61 on the Greene County Property Tax Atlas.
Thank you. Let's see, staff, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members.
Mr.
So
Funk.
tonight, we have a variance request for case number 23-1, as you heard, for 3091 Spring Hill Road. The applicant, this is actually the property location in the city. It's on the kind of middle of town. Here's our infamous drive-by video for you guys.
By the way, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So the applicant's house is the brick in the middle, obviously. So tonight's case is the applicant is requesting a variance for a shed that was illegally built behind the garage there. You can see on the area the shed is outlined in yellow, and here's a picture from the rear of what the shed looks like. So I'm just want to give you a real quick brief background leading up to this variance request. In April of 2020, the applicant applied for a permit to build that existing detached garage that you saw in the video. And at that time, when we do those, he applied for a 864 square foot detached garage. At the time, during that permit process, we take that square footage of the house and we take information from the auditor's office to determine the square footage of the footprint of the house, calculate maximum accessory structure. In this case was 624 feet. So the applicant was notified that he needed to reduce the size of his attached garage by, and then at the time, Melissa Gillall notified the applicant by email, letting him know that he was allowed a maximum of 50% of the footprint of his house. So, and that's a copy of the email where that was addressed with the applicant that the total square footage of all accessory buildings on the site could, had to be 50% of the footprint of the house. So following that email, the applicant had some discussions with Ms. Gillaw, and basically he asked for the square footage of his foundation to be measured. So on April 28th, I met with the applicant to measure the footprint of his house, and the applicant, subsequently reduced the size of his proposed garage, that received his permit, which is here, and then in May 14th, 2020, the applicant, proceeded with the pre-construction inspection was done, and he proceeded with the construction of his garage after that. So leading up to today, up currently, so February 2020, which was just a little over a year later, the city received a complaint about a shed that was built directly behind that garage. On February 18th, he was issued a notice of violation for a shed being built without a permit. Over that summer, we had some notices, communications with the Hansons. On November 20th, the applicant applied for an appeal of the notice of violation. As you're aware, on April 14th of 2022, this board met and denied the applicant's administrative appeal. And then on December 15th, 2020, the applicant applied for a variance for that shed, and at that time applied for an accessory structure permit for the illegally built shed. Basically, in the applicant's variance request, he's basing his appeal based upon the fact that he believes the overhang of his house should be included in his square footage. As you guys may be aware or not aware, we base it upon per code, we base it upon the footprint of the house, not overhangs. It's, basically consistently applied across the city when we calculate these calculations. So per the code, we do it based upon the footprint of the house, not we don't include overhangs. The second basis for the applicant's variance request was that he applied for a permit, or was approved a permit, in February 2022. The applicant was not approved for a permit because the applicant never applied for a permit. He initiated a permit, but never submitted it. So in that time, staff had opened up his previous permit, and actually was auto-generated. Our system has it auto-generates notifications through the whole permit process, which is good, and sometimes it can be bad. In this case, it was bad because it auto-generated a permit, an email for his previous permit. But he never submitted a permit for this actual shed. Number three, he said he was never told he could file a variance until after the September 14th meeting. Unfortunately for the applicant, he never had discussions with us preceding the construction of his illegal shed, so we really could not have any discussions with him as far as a variance process or not. Number four, he felt like he was being treated disrespectfully by Sandra Pereira, our city planner. Again, I can't speak to that. I don't think it has really any variance on it doesn't really have any impact on this variance request, but I do want the board to know that that would be out of character for staff to treat someone disrespectfully. And then lastly, he said he currently houses Beavercreek Youth Hockey Association equipment in his shed. Staff's position on that would be, it would be the Beavercreek Youth Hockey Association's responsibility to store their equipment, maybe rent a storage unit or something like that. He could store it. Wouldn't necessarily just to buy a variance. So basically, what this board is, looking at is there a hardship unique to his property that would warrant the variance request? So in doing that, we look at, we have 8 criteria that we look at. So the first is, does there exist a condition or circumstance relating to the property that would create a practical difficulty for the owner? Staff does not believe that there is. There's nothing unique about the property that's keeping the applicant from being compliant with the code. It's just he desires to have an additional accessory structure. The second condition is the variance is granted. Is it the minimum variance possible, or are there alternatives? Well, again, staff believes that, he built a detached garage that, meets the code requirements, that, he has alternatives. There are alternatives to, additional square footage of accessory structure he could add onto the house. He could store hockey equipment in a storage unit somewhere else. So there are alternatives. The third would be, is the granting of the variance in harmony in general spirit, intent, and purpose of the code? Staff does not believe that it is because, in the code there are specific parameters for the allowance of for accessory structures as far as square footage. And that, again, that calculation is performed uniformly across the city for accessory structures based upon the property. And so therefore we don't believe that it would be in harmony with the code. The next three, we actually, would the granting of the variance be injurious to surrounding properties? Staff obviously doesn't believe that it would. Would it have a deleterious change to the character of the community? We don't necessarily think it would. And this, number 6, would it infringe upon the rights, inquired enjoyment of adjacent property owners, or endanger public safety, or create a nuisance? Staff obviously doesn't believe that would be the case either. But number 7, is the granting of the variance for a compelling reason, not simply because the applicant's plans conflict with code? And staff does not believe it meets this criteria because we believe that, basically it is simply because the applicant's plans conflict with the code. And then lastly, is it granted for an economic benefit to the applicant? And we don't feel it meets this criteria either because there are other alternatives for the applicant. They may be more costly, but there are other alternatives, and even other possibilities like storage of equipment, things like that. And so, we do not think it meets this criteria as well. That's it.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Funk. Okay, we'll hear from the applicant.
Did you need me to read this out?
Yes,
here?
sir, please.
I, David Hanson, affirm that the testimony that I'm about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals in the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth and nothing, or to the best of my knowledge. My address is 3091 Springhill Road, Beavercreek, Ohio, 45434.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I hope you all had a good Christmas and New Year since the last time I saw you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Well, I guess you heard what he had to say, and I guess I'll say what I have to say is during the last meeting, I believe he said he never came out, even though I didn't get approved to even build my garage, technically, I guess, because they said they never came out to pre-do it, or that I must not have got permits from the city of Beavercreek, which obviously he just said he did, because obviously it was built. But, the last meeting we were here, obviously, we determined that the shed was built illegally. I admitted that the shed was built illegally, that I wasn't under the understanding, or I was under the understanding that anything under 200 square feet didn't need a permit. So now that we've established all that, during the course of all these alleged encounters, they said they never encountered me, but they did talk to me in my driveway, and there was never a discussion of, hey, Mr. Hanson, maybe you should file for a variance. That was back in March when one of their inspectors was at my house, and I showed him my email with my the auto-generated approved permits from 2 years later that just so happened to come 4 days after I approved for or applied for my shed. And now when he's saying I never applied for the shed, that's because I have a third email that said that it was closed. So I just assumed that I couldn't even apply any further at that point in time. So there was no reason for me because I had I don't know if you still have those in this packet, or do I need to submit them again? The pre-approval, the approval, and then the closed,
I don't think we have them in this packet.
because I believe all you were here except for this gentleman here was the only one that wasn't.
Right.
And if you'd like to see them, I would be more than happy to.
I think we saw them
Okay,
last time. Right.
But, so, other than that, I don't,
But also, if you have them with you, let's put them into
Okay.
the record. given it's Ms. Gilall. Yeah, that would probably be good.
But, and also based on, I know what they're saying about the footprint of my house and stuff, but I took some pictures, of my house and measured, just the overhang alone on the front of the house is 275 square foot. So I'm only asking for a 2 square foot shed that was already built, so I'm not asking to build some monstrous other thing that, wouldn't affect. And like I said, you've seen the drive-by, you can't even see it at my house, and I have no rear neighbors, so no one's even going to see it. But if you'd like to see the pictures of me measuring that overhang that my wife hated when she bought the house, I would gladly show it to you. And she was right, it is over 5 foot.
I want to say in the microphone that I was right.
Excuse me, are you putting that into evidence?
Yes, I'd like to put that in evidence.
Okay.
And then there's that, and then there's the back one. Yep, you don't need those ones. So, like I said, I have to admit that my wife was right, it is over 5 feet.
It happens to us occasionally.
So, but other than that, I was hoping to apply for the variance based on the following things that they read off already. I am the vice president of the Beavercreek Youth Hockey Association. I don't know if any of you ever had any kids or know anyone that has hockey, but if you ever smelled hockey equipment, 30 bags of hockey equipment, it's not very pleasant. But I don't want to put it in my own garage and have to deal with it there. So I guess that's a hardship that I would prefer not to encounter. But other than that, I don't have any other thing. I mean, I'll leave it up to you guys and let you know, let you figure this out if I'm allowed to keep my shed or not. And I did apply for the permit afterward. Obviously, the day I applied for the variance, I paid for the $30 permit that day also. So I got that too, if you'd like to see that.
Yes, that would be helpful as well.
So, and I don't know the status of it. I have no idea. I never received anything else from it. So I did apply for it that day also.
What am I getting here? It's just one page? Okay. Got it. I think we can just look at that. We'll put it into the record, but we don't need copies. Okay. And do we know what the status of this permit is? I mean, it's just been submitted and it's been received as submitted?
Yeah. So,
That's it? It hasn't been, can't be approved, right?
right, barring denial of the permit, we basically held it in pending based on the outcome of this hearing.
Okay. So if we disapprove the variance, does he get his permit, $30 back?
We would deny the variance permit, we would deny the permit application.
And he get his $30 back?
It's an application fee.
Ah. Okay, so the answer is no. Okay.
So yeah, now I have $230 into this shed, another $230 because the $100 from the last time I was here and then the $130 from this time I'm
We thought was
here.
variance last time.
Yeah,
We thought
so-
that was a variance meeting last time.
So I guess that's where I stand on my, and to get back to the auto-generated permit that was 2 years later, I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know if that's
How are we
typical of,
supposed to know?
of what permits are issued and do I have to wait 2 years to hear from this to get an approval? I don't know, possibly. Maybe I'll get an email in 2 years. You'll see me in 2 years from now. It's possible. But as of right now, I don't have any approvals or anything else, but that could change.
Okay.
So
All right.
that's all I have, sir.
If we have, I'm sure we'll have discussions, so.
Sure.
We'll hang out, we'll
Sure.
call you
I will
back
take
up.
a seat and thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put some information on the record, which
Yes, sir.
would be helpful for both the record and for the applicant. There are different types of variances. The applicant is requesting an area variance. Just to explain that to the applicant, an area variance is released from a dimensional requirement such as area size, setback. The standard of approval for an area variance is practical difficulty. You're required to show that compliance would cause a practical difficulty, and you have the burden of proof in establishing that. As mentioned by staff, an area variance should involve a situation with a substantially unique to the property. I think the typical example I give people is you've got a river running through your property that prevents you from building a house because of the setback requirements. In those cases, the property itself is causing you to need the variance, and in that case, you can't use the property without a variance. That would be an appropriate situation. There should be a concern in a setting where there could be precedent set if there are similar situated properties, such as the applicant's, because if you grant his variance, the reasons for his variance are he illegally built a shed. You would have to then take that as a consideration as precedence in the future when granting variances. So if people ask for forgiveness instead of permission, you will have set the precedent that that's a reason for granting a variance. So I caution you against that.
Counselor, in this situation now, he has the shed may be built, but he already applied for.
Mike,
Oh.
turn your mic on. Just hit the button. Yeah, there you
Pardon me. He's applied for a permit. The shed obviously is there. It was built illegally, but he's trying to rectify that via permit process. Is that not correct?
So he's filed a permit after the fact.
Right.
There's actually a case law specifically too that involves that type of practical difficulty, and I'll get to that and I'll
Okay.
present the case for you. I did want to state, it sounds like he thinks this is going to have a deleterious impact on his an economic loss. An economic loss by itself is not a grounds for granting a variance, and courts have made it very clear that self-created hardship is not grounds for a variance. And I did bring with me copies of the case that I wanted to mention. It's D&D Investment. In that case, I'll get a copy to the.
go. Before we get too far, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. I need to close the public hearing, and we can have this discussion, okay? So, do we have any other input for the public hearing? I don't see anybody else who's going to provide any input, but we have written input, correct,
we
Ms.
do.
Gilmore?
We received one email from Stephen Thompson of 3192 Springhill Road, who was in favor of the case. And then we received a second email from Kevin Story of 3031 Springhill Road, who was in support of the case. Each BZA member did receive a copy of both emails.
Okay. These have been entered into the record. Okay, hearing no other public input, I'm going to close the public hearing, and then we can go ahead and start the discussion. And Mr. City Attorney, we'll go ahead and go back to you.
I apologize,
That's
Mr.
all right.
Chairman. The case that I handed out to you, I think, is substantially similar to the present case. The landowner in that case started building a warehouse before they had obtained a permit. In that particular case, they were required to obtain a zoning compliance certificate. They had constructed 3 walls of a rather large warehouse. They were then had someone file a complaint that said they were building it too close to the road. The city came out, or the county in that case came out and told them that they were in violation of the setback requirements. They then, just like in this case, filed for a variance after the fact and argued that it would be costly to remove the 3 built foundation walls. And the court said that is a self-created hardship and can't be grounds for granting a variance. And since that's the only practical difficulty that the landowner brought forth in that case, the court held that it was inappropriate to grant a variance. So because that was so similar to this case, I thought it was important to bring to the board's attention. Thank
Okay.
you. Also, I think it's important just to back up that there is the statutory requirements in our own code that list 8 factors that the board is supposed to consider, and I would ask that you just take those into consideration. Thanks.
Sure. Not that we necessarily always agree with those presented by the staff, but anyway, but thank you. I appreciate that. Now, you said that there were multiple types of variances. This was an area variance. Are there others?
The other type of variance is a use variance, which
Okay.
I don't think it's helpful to go into the distinction.
No, I totally understand. I just wanted to find out what that other type of variance was, but yeah. Okay. All right. Let's open this up for board discussion. And I will start with Mr. Esman.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Counselor, in this case, I don't believe that the applicant has pled financial hardship on this. I did not hear that in the testimony. Did I miss something?
I believe that when the city talked about there being alternatives to where they could put the hockey equipment, they would obviously either need to store it in the garage someplace else or get a facility. The economic hardship that I was specifically referring to, he said that he's already put money into building this shed, which would have to be removed. So he's going to be out that money, plus he talked about being out of fees that he's used to both apply for permits and apply for the variance and appeal the prior decision, the prior code offense. So those were the same exact arguments that were made in the D&D case. It's going to cost us money to tear down these walls, and that's not sufficient for a variance.
Thank you. And Matt, could I ask you to run the video again for me, please?
Let me back all the way up real quick.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, it's no problem. Only take a second.
Thank you. Matt, while you're up there,
Sure.
can you give me an opinion on how, I don't want to say how many, but how prevalent are houses with this type of construction with an eave overhang of that magnitude, in your opinion?
Probably really depends on the era in which the house was constructed. But, what you need to consider is it's not just the eaves. We have instances like the neighbor's house there with the overhang porch.
Mm-hmm.
We don't consider that either. If it's not an enclosed habitable space, if it's open framed, porches, anything like that is not included in the square footage.
And that's the rationale then for the finding in the statute of footprint only?
That's probably part of the rationale. The other thing to consider is it would be near impossible for staff to go out on every zoning application and climb a ladder and measure that eave overhang, and what spot on the house and which end, and to calculate all that additional square footage. We go with the footprint of the house. The county, oops. I don't know where. There it is. So the county also, goes with footprint of the house. That's something we can easily, check online and verify with county records and things like that. So, again, if you started adding eaves and overhangs and porches and unenclosed, enclosed or covered decks and all, it would just.
I'm just trying to
a
get to,
challenge.
the applicant has an argument. I'm trying to understand
Sure.
the rationale in my own mind of how the code was created, and why the code was created not to include overhangs and such, and to merely look at the footprint. That's what I'm trying to get at, and I think you're answering my question, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the code itself says that space has to be habitable. So unless you can habitate underneath an
Understand
overhang. Yeah.
I'm just trying to, I want to put the logic into the testimony. Thank you. I have nothing else. But I reserve my right.
Okay, let's go to the other side of the room for Mr. Rust.
Yeah, so in this, I see the footprint of the house is considered. Is there any consideration for the lot size itself in these sort of permits? Seems like it's quite a significant lot size. I'm not sure exactly the acreage of it.
Yeah, it is. Any lot that's over 20,000 over 20,000 square feet, any lots over 20,000 square feet can have up to 50% of the footprint of the house. If it's less than 20,000 square feet, that square footage is decreased. So,
Thank you. That's all for me.
That's it? Okay, Mr. Clunin.
Yeah, so just a quick question maybe for city attorney over there. Josh, if you could help me understand. I'm looking at the case that you have provided for us. And obviously you mentioned that one of the main things we need to consider today is the practical difficulties component of this sort of variance. And I look at this case, at the bottom of page 2 and going into page 3, and it lists 7 factors that the Supreme Court, Ohio Supreme Court, listed as saying, you know, this would be a practical difficulty, or these are some examples of it. And I've been trying to read through them fast enough to compare them with our zoning code. Is that roughly a correlation? Are those 7 factors that the Supreme Court set forth similar to the ones that the Beavercreek zoning code has? Do you know?
So the 7 factors of I think it's the Duncan test, go to whether there's a practical difficulty. And the very first factor in the city of Beavercreek's list of factors you're supposed to look at is whether there's a practical difficulty.
So then, for lack of a better way to describe it, the 7 Duncan factors would be kind of combined into our Beavercreek zoning code number 1 factor. And then the remaining 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the zoning code are not considered in those Duncan factors?
Yes.
Okay. I see. Well, that'll cause me to do some more reading, so that's all I have right now.
You reserve the right for seconds, right?
I do, yes, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Butler.
And I should say, sorry, there are some of them are paraphrases. They're not exact, but they're very, very similar.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was not here at the last meeting, but I read the minutes of meeting and I watched video.
Okay.
And I understood all that problem you went through. At the same time, I also have, I understand the analysis of the staff. They have done the job they're supposed to do. They go by the regulation and zoning code. So, you know, what happened when applicant goes beyond those zoning regulation code, then their job is anyway, it's beyond them. That's what they ask for variance, and that's how this board is established to see individual issues and take the big picture and make a decision. So, you build without permit, then notice of violation, then you apply, and then 30 days time period over because of lack of supporting document, whatever happened. So things happen is not a perfect word. Yours is not a unique situation. Other people have gone through, but they have gone through because, first off, maybe they are not aware of, and mostly they are not aware of. They think, oh, a small shed, there may not be need of permit, and so it is it's not like they are done unknowingly. It's unknowingly thing happen.
Yeah, and like I said, if it wouldn't have been for the
Yeah.
applying on the Friday and then getting a approval on a Monday
Yeah.
for something that was 2 years prior, was just, obviously I don't work for the city, and I didn't know I needed to bring an attorney today, like the city brought, but, it is what it is, over 102 square foot shed, so obviously I would have brought an attorney if I knew I needed one, but
And-
anyways, to get back to that, it wasn't like, there was just a lot of miscommunication over this, that's all.
And then you built it because you needed space,
Correct.
extra space, and then you are hockey association and some equipment to be stored, and then you in your neighborhood they have no issue whatsoever because
No, all
of
my neighbors
appearance
approve of it,
or
and they like me,
unsightly
so.
or in their way. So
Well, the only other question I had while I'm up here is, why would they even let me apply for the $30 permit in that office that day? if it's not even acceptable. I mean, I don't understand. If the attorney already said this isn't, not even allowed to happen, why was I allowed to spend $30 on a permit that technically I should never even be able to apply for?
Did you apply for that in person or
Yes,
online?
in person.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point in time, if he's going to sit there and say that I can't have the shed under case law, whatever, I should never have been allowed to go in there and spend $30 if that's the case. I mean, obviously, this is after the fact they got him involved because they don't want me to have my shed there, and I get it, and I understand that, and it was just miscommunications on both sides. I wish it never got to this point. I don't, I don't want to spend your time here or my time or anyone else's time here doing this, but, we're to this point at this point in time. But I just find it ironic that, they have an attorney here now, but back when I was there, they didn't have an attorney telling me that I shouldn't pay $30 for this permit that's not going to get approved.
Did you apply for the permit and the variance at the same time?
Yes,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
so,
So, yeah, I heard honor,
Go ahead.
I heard honorable attorney that, you cannot give variance on economical basis, and there are other state guidelines. But this is small town, and we don't. and
I realize that, but I mean, they should have known that I shouldn't even be able to
Yeah,
apply
we-
for it. I would think the city would know that
Right.
if I can't even qualify for a variance, they should have just flat out told me, sir, you don't qualify for a variance based on what you've submitted here. Keep your $30 and move on. That's what should have been told to me. But now we're 230 into this, and, I mean, is it going to be next month I'm going to be standing here in front of you again for some other, I don't know, maybe we'll just make something up for next month. But regardless, I think they should have told me at that point in time, too. I don't think it's fair that they let me go spend another $130 when, if he's, going to be here saying that I'm not, no matter what, I can't have this shed, then I should have been told that at that time, I would think.
All right, so for clarification, it's not his call,
I realize that.
but he's here to advise us.
Yes, I realize that,
And-
but I'm saying they should have been advising the city planning board or the zoning board is what I assume he's.
Counselor, in
job
this
is.
case, you're representing the Board of Zoning Appeals, correct?
Correct. I'm helping you guys steer. Once again, I am pointing at
He's
rocks
not
in the
helping
river,
me, I
but
know
you are
that.
steering the boat.
He's not helping me, I can figure that one out, so, but anyways.
So my views is that we should consider favorably your, issue, the thing you went through. Maybe there was some miscommunication between you and the staff or whatever, but staff have done a good job in going through the codes and in saying that you build without permit, which is you admit anyway.
But they also told me I built my garage without a permit
Yeah.
in the last meeting, which
Yeah.
obviously we
So-
know that's
so
not the
anyway,
case.
so,
I'm just saying that
yeah.
that was said in the last meeting that I had built and finished it. I didn't get a pre-approval and I didn't get a post-approval,
Okay.
which obviously it's sitting there. And if they're this much worried over a 102 square foot shed, could you imagine what they'd do with my garage? I'd probably be in prison.
So, yeah, basically my views is that it should be considered favorably and come to some conclusion.
Yes, and that's why I'm here again, hoping that, well, obviously I'm hoping it
Thank-
comes in my favor, but
Thank-
I guess we'll wait and see.
That's all.
Thank you.
And I certainly appreciate that he's had some perceived difficulties with the city. I just would, once again, that is not any of the factors that are determinative in a variance. You have to go by what the statute requires. Sorry, the ordinance, not the statute.
Okay, my turn. First of all, Mr. Hanson, I'm going to apologize for the confusion that has permeated this whole situation between you and the city. Getting that permit approval right after you submitted or started the application for your shed, my understanding is that was it was an update to your previous permit for your garage, which, like to say, they said the system automatically generated that approval, even though it had been previously approved. There was something in that permit process that was updated, which caused that that approval to be regenerated. I can see how that caused you confusion. Sure. Yeah, it would be helpful.
I, Kimberly Hanson, affirm that the testimony that I'm about to give before the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
Concerning the miscommunication about the approval, when my husband presented, when someone came out to our house to discuss the shed removal, and when my husband said that he got an approval letter, the associate that came to our house said that he didn't believe that, so my husband went to his phone and pulled up the email and showed him the approval letter. Why at that point, when my husband showed that gentleman the approval letter, did he not tell us, oh, that's the approval for your garage? Why, if he didn't understand what that approval was, how were we supposed to understand what that approval was? So I don't feel it was fair that we weren't explained at that moment, Mr. Hanson, that's the approval for your garage, not the approval for the shed. And I just wanted to make that, I'm not sure that that's any bearing at all to this case, but I feel as though we have kind of been blindsided on a lot of things, and we haven't been fairly communicated with regarding the approval and regarding applying for a variance. It was never discussed with us. At that point, it would have been a great opportunity for that associate to tell us, that's the approval for the garage, but you can't apply for a variance. And that was never mentioned. I just wanted to mention that. I wish it would have been better communicated.
Absolutely agree.
That's all. Okay.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the code is pretty clear. I don't know that there's a whole lot that we can do, because the only hardship that you really have is that you have a shed that was not supposed to have been built, and I think our hands are pretty much tied. However, and I'm not trying to design alternatives here for you, but if, and I'm just asking the question, this is probably asked of the city, if you had an abutment, well, not abutment's not the right word, but if the shed was elevated off of the ground and attached to your garage, it wouldn't be part of that footprint. Am I correct on that? I mean, if it was not actually an accessory structure, it'd just be now an overhang of the garage.
It would still be considered a part of the garage. It would just be elevated off. We'd still count the perimeter, because you would have to have footing underneath that shed to support the weight of the shed.
No, well, I'm not talking about a shed. Let's say if he was to cut a hole in his garage and put like a big bay window out the back of his garage, right?
If it was a bay window, obviously,
Something that was
but if,
cantilevered,
It would
you know,
still exceed the allowable.
yeah, it's still exceed the allowable square footage.
but it's not part of the footage. It's not part of the footprint any longer.
It wouldn't have to be part of the footprint. It would still exceed the allowable storage.
Sitting on the same foundation.
No, it's not sitting on a foundation.
When I applied for my garage, I wanted an overhang on my garage and was told I couldn't have an overhang. So that obviously counted as a cook at that time. It did not, it was not.
You got to step up to the mic.
I wasn't allowed to have an overhang because I wanted an overhang to put my boat underneath the overhang, and I was told I was not allowed to have an overhang because it would exceed. So can I have an overhang now?
No.
Is that, or not? I mean, can I build an overhang now is what I'm saying, because if the overhang on my house doesn't count, then the overhang on my garage shouldn't count.
You're right. You're right. I'm again,
I'm
I'm
just
not
asking
trying
the
to
question
create
why I'm here,
solutions,
so I can
but I
get a
just
clear,
have,
because the attorney's here, so he might be able to clarify it for me. So can I build I can't build an overhang on my garage.
So I can't cite to the specific code provision off the top of my head because it's so large, but the code provision regarding accessory structures includes overhangs, I believe. And Matt and Randy could probably speak to that better, they have a better understanding of
So
every one
it
of the
counts as a
provisions.
footprint if you're building something, but not on your house. That's what you're saying.
So the code says for the primary structure, it's the footprint of the building that's habitable. There's then accessory structure, which includes the overhang of the accessory structure. So there are different code definitions, and this would be an issue if you had I mean, I understand though, it's hard to make, why are those distinctions? If you wanted them changed, it would be to change the code through the legislative process.
Okay. Sorry I opened that can of worms. Seconds?
No, I think I'm prepared to make a motion, unless
Well-
someone else has seconds.
You want to talk some more?
No, we should make a motion.
Everybody good? Okay, then we have a permit for, or a variance request for Mr. Hanson's shed, V23-1, and I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that, as unfortunate as it is, that Mr. Hanson has spent some money and there's been confusion, that clearly is not a reason for us to, under the statute, to allow a variance. However, I think he does have recourse, or may have recourse, as a moral obligation claim to Beavercreek City Council to recoup some funds. That all being said, and that's just my opinion, I think that the city has shown under the regulations for a variance that the applicant does not meet the variance, and therefore I would move that we deny the variance based upon the findings.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second for that motion? I will second that motion. So, further discussion before we vote on that motion. Mr. Butler, you look like you want to say something.
Okay, you want to have vote, a second motion?
Oh, there's a motion on, there's a motion on the table, and it has been seconded. And I, based on the discussion, or the points that Mr. Essman had made, I would actually like to ask a question of the planning director, if that's okay. How are you, sir?
Good. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yes, sir.
Real quickly, is there a process, a procedure, a vehicle where Mr. Hanson can request for at least some recuperation of monies that he spent for the permit process, the variance process, the appeal process? And he went down that path because there was a state of confusion.
No, I understand that there was confusion on our suggestions in terms of the procedure. With the administrative appeal and the variance request, the fees are to recoup because we're required to post notices in the newspaper. We're required to send out mailings to everyone within 500 feet, so that fee is there to cover the cost of those notifications. I can look further into the $30 permit application fee, but I would want to take a look at that further in terms of the determination on a refund of the permit fee itself.
Okay. I mean, because if he applied for the variance and the permit at the same time and the same day, clearly he should have been told that don't apply for this permit because you're applying for a variance.
Well, one could make the leap that if we told them don't apply for the permit, then we're already telling them that it's denied and we're making the variance decision for him at that time. And staff doesn't have that authority to make a decision on a variance. We can give our opinion on this and how we think it would go based on our experience. But to say that, no, you can't apply for a permit would be us determining that the variance has already been determined, and that's beyond our ability.
I think we're splitting hairs here, but I could see a case where I'm applying for a variance and I'm applying for a permit, and the discussion could be that, well, you should probably hold off on the permit until the variance is decided. Right? I mean, you're not
There's
saying one way or the
implications,
other.
there's implications on we can't just not accept permit applications. If somebody wants to apply, we can't say, no, you're not allowed to apply. And so we can't just deny an application outright.
No, I'm not saying deny it, but have the discussion of, it might be beneficial, it might be wise for you to hold off on the permit until such time as the variance is decided. I mean, that's advice and consent that
Sure.
you guys do all the time, right? So, all right. But there may be a path for him to be able to apply for some recoupment, reimbursement. Yes?
My past municipal experience tells me that he can always apply as a moral obligation claim for a loss that he's incurred to city council.
Okay.
Does Beavercreek accept moral obligation claims, Counselor?
Frankly, I don't know the answer to that. I just know that this conversation, it's irrelevant to the issue of whether the variance should be approved or not.
That's true.
We can go offline and have that discussion at some other point, but the
Sure.
purpose of this hearing is variance,
No.
yes, variance, no.
I'm just trying to get all the information on the table, right? I mean, this is, you weren't here last month. This is a continuation, well, kind of sort of a continuation of last month's appeal, but.
I watched the video.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second to deny the variance. Ms. Gilall, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clunin,
Aye, I vote in favor of that.
Mr. Estman,
Aye.
Mr. Rust,
Aye.
Mr. Botla,
I'm opposed to,
so no vote.
no, no.
Mr. Archibald,
Yes. Aye. Mr. Hanson, we have denied your variance request, and I wish this had gone differently.
I would have to.
So,
Thank you for your time.
you're welcome. Okay. Do we have any other business? If not, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move the motion to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
By voice vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned.